Back, and we're continuing on in Sense and Sensibility. I do always have to show the book. I actually have it in front of my face. I don't know. Chapter 2, Volume 2, Chapter 2. We're continuing on to see how Eleanor, what juicy tea she's gonna get out of this Lucy Steele about freaking Edward Ferrars. She's made her way over to the filigree table while Marianne's playing piano, so nobody at the card table can hear what their conversation is going to be. There's a lot going on in this room with these women. Filigree, pianoforte, cards, lots happening. And I'd love to hear what you guys are all reading on your own time. Love a comment. Slap a comment on the video to let me know what you're reading and what you're enjoying about this series that I'm doing, or what you're reading about. Love to hear it. Love to hear some feedback. Love to hear some feedback and some comments from the crew, from the Emily's Book Corner crew. Meanwhile, let's do chapter 2. Ooh, I'm so excited. In a firm, though cautious tone, Eleanor thus began. A firm, though cautious tone. Firm, though cautious. I can do this. I should be undeserving of the confidence you have honored me with, if I felt no desire for its countenance, or no farther curiosity on its subject. I will not apologize, therefore, for bringing it forward again. Thank you, cried Lucy warmly, for breaking the ice. You have set my heart at ease by it. Yeah, sometimes there's awkward stuff and you just gotta break the ice, and then you can be like, oh my god, thank you, I feel the same way. Just break the ice, people. For I somehow or other afraid I had offended you by what I told you that Monday. Offended me? How could you suppose so? Believe me, and Eleanor spoke it with the truest sincerity, nothing could be farther from my intention than to give you such an idea. Could you have a motive for the trust that was not honorable and flattering to me? And yet I do assure you, replied Lucy, her little sharp eyes full of meaning, there seemed to me to be a coldness and displeasure in your manner that made me quite uncomfortable. I felt sure that you was angry with me. I felt sure that you was angry with me, and have been quarrelling with myself ever since, for having took such a liberty as to trouble you with my affairs. But I am very glad to find it was only my own fancy, and that you do not really blame me. If you knew what a consolation it was to me to relieve my heart by speaking to you of what I'm always thinking of every moment of my life. They've got nothing else to do. Your compassion would make you overlook everything else, I am sure. Indeed, I can easily believe that it was a great relief to you to acknowledge your situation to me, and be assured that you shall never have reason to repent it. Your case is a very unfortunate one. You seem to me to be surrounded with difficulties, and you will have need of all your mutual affection to support you under them. Mr. Ferrars, I believe, is entirely dependent on his mother. He has only £2,000 of his own. It would be madness to marry upon that, though for my own part I could give up every prospect of more without a sigh. I have been always used to a very small income, and could struggle with any poverty for him, but I love him too well to be the selfish means of robbing him, perhaps, of all that his mother might give him if he married to please her. We must wait. It may be for many years. With almost every other man in the world, it would be an alarming prospect. But Edward's affection and constancy, yeah, nothing can deprive me of, I know. But Edward's affection and constancy, nothing can deprive me of, I know. That conviction must be everything to you, and he is undoubtedly supported by the same trust in yours. If the strength of your reciprocal attachment had failed, as between many people and under many circumstances that naturally would have during a 4 years engagement, your situation would have been pitiable indeed. Lucy here looked up, but Eleanor was careful in guarding her countenance from every expression that could give to her words a suspicious tendency. Edward's love for me, said Lucy, has been pretty well put to the test by our long, very long absence since we were first engaged, and it has stood the trial so well that I should be unpardonable to doubt it now. I can safely say that he has never gave me one moment's alarm on that account from the first. How would she possibly know? How could she possibly know? He's out doing God knows what with who, and how would it ever get back to her? Eleanor hardly knew whether to smile or sigh at this accession. Lucy went on. I am rather jealous, of a jealous temper too by nature. And from our different situations in life, from his being so much more in the world than me, and our continual separation, I was inclined for suspicion to have found out the truth in an instant, if there had been the slightest alteration in his behaviour to me when we met, or any lowness of spirit that I could not account for. But if he had talked more of one lady than another, or seemed in any respect less happy at Longstaple than he used to be, I do not mean to say that I am particularly observant or quick-sighted in general, but in such a case I am sure I could not be deceived. All this, thought Eleanor, is very pretty, but it can impose upon neither of us. But what, said she after a short silence, are your views? Or have you none but that of waiting for Mr. Ferrars's death, which is a melancholy and shocking extremity? Is her son determined to submit to this, and to all the tedious of many years of suspense in which it may involve you, rather than run the risk of her displeasure for a while by owning the truth? If we could be certain that it would only be for a while, but Mrs. Ferrars is a very headstrong, proud woman, and in her first fit of anger upon hearing it would very likely secure everything to Robert, and the idea of that, for Edward's sake, frightens away all my inclination for hasty measures. And for your own sake, too, or are you carrying your disinterestedness beyond reason? Lucy looked at Eleanor again and was silent. Do you know Mr. Robert Ferrars? Asked Eleanor. Not at all. I never saw him, but I fancy he is very unlike his brother. Silly, and a great coxcomb. I don't remember if I looked that word up before. Coxcomb. A coxcomb. Hold on, I just have to hold on. Oh, that's a restaurant in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. A vain and conceited man, a dandy. Coxcomb. Conceited, foolish dandy, a pretentious fop. A dandy. That's funny. I'm going to start using that. He's a coxcomb. I don't know if that's actually... I don't know. I shouldn't. Oh, not at all. I never saw him. But I fancy he is very unlike his brother, silly and a great coxcomb. A great coxcomb, repeated Miss Steele, whose ear had caught those words by a sudden pause in Marianne's music. Uh-oh. Oh, they are talking of their favourite beau, I dare say. No, sister, cried Lucy, you are mistaken there. Our favourite beaux are not great coxcombs. I can answer for that, as Miss Dashwood is not, said Mrs. Jennings, laughing heartily, for he is one of the modestest, prettiest behaved young men I ever saw, but as for Lucy, she is such a sly little creature, there is no finding out who she likes. Oh, cried Miss Steele, looking significantly round at them, I dare say Lucy's beau is quite as modest and pretty behaved as Miss Dashwood's. Eleanor blushed in spite of herself. Lucy bit her lip and looked angrily at her sister. A mutual silence took place for some time. Lucy first put an end to it by saying in a lower tone, though Marianne was then given them the powerful protection of a very magnificent concerto, I will honestly tell you of one scheme which has lately come into my head for bringing matters to bear. Indeed, I am bound to let you into the secret, for you are a party concerned. I dare say you have seen enough of Edward to know that he would prefer the church to every other profession. Now, my plan is that he should take orders as soon as he can, and then through your interest, which I am sure you would be kind enough to use our friendship for him, use out of friendship for him, I hope out of some regard to me, your brother might be persuaded to give him Norland living, which I understand is a very good one, and the preset incumbent not likely to live a great while. Present, I said present, that's crazy. Present incumbent not likely to live a great while. That would be enough for us to marry upon, and we might trust to time and chance for the rest. I should be always happy, replied Eleanor, to show any mark of my esteem and friendship for Mr. Ferrars, but do not you perceive that my interest on such an occasion would be perfectly unnecessary? He is brother to Mrs. Darnton Dashwood. That must be recommendation enough to her husband. But Mrs. Darnton Dashwood would not much approve of Edward's going into orders. Then I rather suspect that my interest would do very little. They were again silent for many minutes. At length Lucy exclaimed, but with a deep sigh, I believe it would be the wisest to put an end to the business at once by dissolving the engagement. We seem to be so beset with difficulties on every side, that though it would make us miserable for a time, we should be even happier perhaps in the end. But you will not give me your advice, Miss Dashwood. No, answered Eleanor with a smile, which concealed every agitated feeling. On such a subject I certainly will not. You know very well that my opinion would have no weight with you unless it were on the side of your wishes. Indeed you are wrong, replied Lucy with great solemnity. I know nobody of whose judgment I think so highly as I do of yours, and I do really believe that if you was to say to me, is she, like, this is like her illiterate speaking, or is this, I'm so confused by it, that if you was to say to me, not that people who sound like that are illiterate, it's just that that's the way it sounds to me in my head. If you was to say to me, sorry, I advise you by all means to put an end to your engagement with Mr. Ed Ferrars. It would be more for the happiness of both of you. I should resolve upon doing it immediately. Oh, is Eleanor going to do that? Eleanor blushed for the insincerity of Edward's future wife and replied, this compliment would effectually frighten me from giving an opinion on the subject I had formed, the subject I had formed one. It raises my influence much too high, and the power of dividing two people so tenderly attached is too much for an indifferent person. 'Tis because you are an indifferent person, said Lucy, with some pique, and laying a particular stress on those words, that your judgment must justly have such weight with me. If you could be supposed to be biased in any respect by your own feelings, your opinion would not be worth having. Eleanor thought it wisest to make no answer to this, lest they might provoke each other to an unsuitable increase of ease and unreserve, and was even partly determined never to mention the subject again. Another pause, therefore, of many minutes' duration succeeded this speech, and Lucy was still the first to end it. Shall you be in town this winter, Miss Dashwood? Said she, with all her customary complacency. Certainly not. I am sorry for that, returned the other, with her eyes brightened at that information. It would have gave me such pleasure to see you there, but I dare say you will go for all that. To be sure, your brother and sister will ask you to come to them. It will not be in my power to accept their invitation if they do. How unlucky that is! I had quite depended on meeting you there. Anne and me are to go the end of January to see some relations who have been wanting us to visit them for several years, but I only go for the sake of seeing Edward. He will be there in February. Otherwise, London would have no chance for me. I have not spirits for it. Eleanor was soon called to the card table by the conclusion of the first rubber, and the confidential discourse of the two ladies was therefore at an end, to which both of them submitted without any reluctance, for nothing had been said on either side to make them dislike each other less than they had done before, and Eleanor sat down to the card table with the melancholy persuasion that Edward was not only without affection for the person who was to be his wife, but that he had not even the chance of being tolerably happy in marriage, which sincere affection on her side would have given. For self-interest alone could induce a woman to keep a man to an engagement of which she seemed so thoroughly aware that he was weary of. From this time the subject was never revived by Eleanor, and when entered on by Lucy, who seldom missed an opportunity of introducing it, and was particularly careful to inform her confidante of her happiness whenever she received a letter from Edward, it was treated by the former with calmness and caution, and dismissed as soon as civility would allow, for she felt such conversation to be an indulgence with that which Lucy did not deserve, and which were dangerous to herself. The visit of the Miss Steeles at Barton Park was lengthened far beyond that what the first invitation implied. Their favour increased. They could not be spared. Sir John would not hear of their going, and in spite of the numerous and long-arranged engagements in Exeter, in spite of the absolute necessity of their returning to fulfil them immediately, which was in full force at the end of every week, they were prevailed on to stay nearly 2 months at the park, and to assist in the due celebration of that festival which requires a more than ordinary share of private balls and long dinners to proclaim its importance. I feel like the Dashwoods have been declining all the invitations to go anywhere, and I feel like maybe that's why. Maybe they can't go because of Sir John, but I don't know what they're talking about. A celebration, there's a festival, I don't know what's happening. But for some reason, the Dashwoods keep getting invited to a bunch of things, and they keep declining and saying no, and I don't really know why. But that's reading comprehension for you. Let's do chapter 3 so we can figure this out. Chapter 3, part 2, Sense and Sensibility. Though Mrs. Jennings was in the habit of spending a large portion of the year at the houses of her children and friends, she was not without a settled habitation of her own. Since the death of her husband, who had traded with success in a less elegant part of town, she had resided every winter in a house in one of the streets near Portman Square. What's it say about that? There's a little tiny one back there. What chapter are we on? 3. Chapter 3, Portman Square. What's it say? Most of the action of the London episodes of the novel take place around Mayfair and Covent Garden, the area in which Jane's brother Henry lived. But Mrs. Jennings' accommodation at Berkeley Street off Portman Square is just north of Oxford Street and closer to the Marble Arch. See Nicolaus Pevsner, the architectural setting of Jane Austen's novels. Wow, there's a book called The Architectural Setting of Jane Austen's Novels. Holy moly. Journal of the Warburg and Cortland Institutes. Austen's sister Cassandra stayed with Henry at 24 Upper Berkeley Street, Portman Square, in February 1801. Margaret Leslie writes to Charlotte Luttrell from Portman Square in the letter the 10th of Leslie Castle. Wow. That's incredible. A whole other book just about the architecture in Jane Austen's novels. My goodness gracious. Where's that little one? Portman Square. Okay. Towards this home, she began on the approach of January to turn her thoughts, and thither she one day abruptly, and very unexpectedly by them, asked the elder Miss Dashwoods to accompany her. Eleanor, without observing the varying complexion of her sister, and the animated look which spoke no indifference to the plan, immediately gave a grateful but absolute denial for both, in which she believed herself to be speaking their united inclinations. The reason alleged that their determined resolution of not leaving their mother at that time of year. Mrs. Jennings received the refusal with some surprise, with a Z, and repeated her invitation immediately. Oh, Lord, I am sure your mother can spare you very well, and I do beg you will favour me with your company, for I have quite set my heart upon it. Don't fancy that you will be any inconvenience to me, for I shan't put myself at all out of the way for you. It will only be sending Betty to the coach, and I hope I can afford that. We three should be able to go very well in my chaise, and when they are in town, if you do not like to go wherever I do, well and good. You may always go with one of my daughters. I am sure your mother will not object to it, for I have had such good luck in getting my own children off my hands, that she will think me a very fit person to have the charge of you, and I don't get one of you at least well married before I have done with you, it shall not be my fault. She wants to marry off the world. I shall speak a good word for you to all the young men, you may depend upon it. I have a notion, said Sir John, that Miss Mary Ann would not object to such a scheme if the elder sister would come into it. It is very hard indeed that she should not have a little pleasure, because Miss Dashwood does not wish it. So I would advise you two to set off for town when you are tired of Barton, without saying a word to Miss Dashwood about it. Nay, cried Miss Jennings, I am sure I shall be monstrous glad of Miss Mary Ann's company, whether Miss Dashwood will go or not. Only the more merrier, I say. Only the more the merrier, I say. And I thought it would be more comfortable for them to be together, because if they got tired of me, they might talk to one another and laugh at my odd ways behind my back. I love that you just know people are going to be talking about you behind their back, and you're like, just be together so that you guys can talk to each other. That's really funny. But one or the other, if not both of them, I must have. Lord bless me, how do you think I can live poking by myself? I have always used till this winter to have Charlotte with me. Come, Miss Marianne, let us strike hands upon bargain, and if Miss Dashwood will change her mind by and by, why, so much the better. I thank you, ma'am, sincerely thank you, said Marianne with warmth, but your invitation has ensured my gratitude forever, and it would give me such happiness, yes, almost the greatest happiness I am capable of, to be able to accept it. But my mother, my dearest, kindest mother, I feel the injustice of what Elinor has urged, and if she were to be made less happy, less comfortable by our absence, oh, nothing should tempt me to leave her. It must not be a struggle. Mrs. Jennings repeated her assurance that Mrs. Dashwood could spare them perfectly well, and Elinor, who now understood her sister, and saw to what indifference to almost everything else she was carried by her eagerness to be with Willoughby again, made no farther direct opposition to the plan, and merely referred to her mother's decision, from whom, however, she scarcely expected to receive any support in her endeavour to prevent a visit, which she could not approve of for Mary Ann, in which, on her own account, she had particular reasons to avoid it. Whatever Marianne was desirous of, her mother would be eager to promote. She could not expect to influence the latter of cautiousness of conduct in an affair, respecting which she had never been able to inspire her with distrust, and she dared not explain the motive of her own disinclination for going to London. That Marianne, fastidious as she was, thoroughly acquainted with Mrs. Jennings' manners, and invariably disgusted by them, should overlook every inconvenience of that kind, should disregard whatever must be most wounding to her irritable feelings in pursuit of one object, was such a proof, so strong, so full of the importance of that object to her, as Elinor, in spite of all that had passed, was not prepared to witness. On being informed of the invitation, Mrs. Dashwood persuaded that such an excursion would be productive of much amusement to both her daughters, and perceiving through all her affection and attention to herself how much the heart of Marianne was in it, would not hear of the declining their offer upon her account, insisted on both their accepting it directly, and then began to foresee, with her usual cheerfulness, a variety of advantages that would accrue to them all from this separation. I am delighted with the plan, she cried. It is exactly what I could wish. Margaret and I shall be much benefited by it as yourselves. Yeah, it'll give me time to get to know Margaret. I just don't know anything about her. When you and the Middletons are gone, we shall go on so quietly and happily together with our books and our music. and you will find Margaret so improved when you come back again. And I have a little plan of alteration for your bedrooms, too, which may now be performed without inconvenience to anyone. It is very right that you should go to town. I would have every young woman in your condition in life acquainted with the manners and amusements of London. You will be under the care of a motherly, good sort of woman of whose kindness to you I can have no doubt, and in all probability you will see your brother, and whatever may be his faults, or the faults of his wife, when I consider whose son he is, I cannot bear to have you so wholly estranged from each other. Oh, yeah. Though with your usual anxiety for our happiness, said Eleanor, you have been obviating every impediment to the present scheme which occurred to you. There is still one objection which, in my opinion, cannot be so easily removed. Marianne's countenance sunk. And what, said Mrs. Dashwood, is my dear prudent Eleanor going to suggest? What formidable obstacle is she now to bring forward? Do not let me hear a word about the expense of it. My objection is this. Though I think very well of Mrs. Jennings' heart, she is not a woman whose society can afford us pleasure, or whose protection will give us consequence. That is very true, replied her mother, but of her society, separately from that of other people, you will scarcely have anything at all, and you will almost always appear in public with Lady Middleton. If Eleanor was frightened away by her dislikes of Miss Jennings, said Marianne, at least it need not prevent my accepting her invitation. I have no such scruples, and I am sure I could put up with every unpleasantness of that kind with very little effort. Marianne, really. Eleanor could not help smiling at this display of indifference toward the manners of a person to whom she had often had the difficulty in persuading Marianne to behave with tolerable politeness, and resolved within herself that if her sister persisted in going, she would go likewise, as she did not think it proper that Marianne should be left to the sole guidance of her own judgment, or that Mrs. Jennings should be abandoned to the mercy of Marianne for all the comfort of her domestic hours. To this determination she was the more easily reconciled by recollecting that Edward Ferrars, by Lucy's account, was not to be in town before February, and that their visit, without any unreasonable abridgment, must be previously finished. I will have you both go, said Mrs. Dashwood. These objections are nonsensical. You will have much pleasure in being in London, and especially in being together. And if Eleanor would ever condescend to anticipate enjoyment, she would foresee it there from a variety of sources. She would perhaps expect some from improving her acquaintance with sister-in-law's family. Eleanor had often wished for an opportunity of attempting to weaken her mother's dependence on the attachment of Edward himself, that the shock might be the less when the whole truth were revealed, and now on this attack... I just thought I was on the wrong page, because I feel like I'm entering in a paragraph that was already beginning that I didn't know about. And now on this attack, though almost hopeless of success, she forced herself to begin her design by saying, as calmly as she could, I like Edward Ferrars very much, and shall always be glad to see him, but as to the rest of the family, it is a matter of perfect indifference to me whether I am ever known to them or not. Mrs. Dashwood smiled and said nothing. Marianne lifted up her eyes in astonishment, and Eleanor conjectured that she might as well have held her tongue. After very little farther discourse, it was finally settled that the invitation should be fully accepted. Mrs. Jennings received the information with a great deal of joy, and many assurances of kindness and care, nor was it a matter of pleasure merely to her. Sir John was delighted, for to a man whose prevailing anxiety was the dread of being alone, the acquisition of the number of inhabitants in London was something. Even Lady Middleton took the trouble of being delighted, which was putting herself rather out of her way. She took the trouble of being delighted. And as for Miss Steeles, especially Lucy, they had never been so happy in their lives as this intelligence made them. I've never been so happy in my life to hear that you're coming with us to London. Eleanor submitted to the arrangement which counteracted her wishes with less reluctance than she expected to feel. With regard to herself, it was now a matter of unconcern whether she went to town or not, And when she saw her mother so thoroughly pleased with the plan, and her sister exhilarated by it in look, voice, and manner, resorted to all of her usual animation, and elevated to more than her usual gaiety, she could not be dissatisfied with the cause, and would hardly allow herself to distrust the consequence. Marianne's joy was almost a degree beyond happiness. So great was the perturbation of her spirits and her impatience to be gone. Her unwillingness to quit her mother was her only restorative to calmness. And at the moment of parting, her grief on that score was excessive. Her mother's affliction was hardly less. And Eleanor was the only one of the three who seemed to consider the separation as anything short of eternal. Their departure took place in the first week in January. The Middletons were to follow in about a week. The Miss Steeles kept their station at the park, and were to quit it only with the rest of the family. There we are. There we are. They're finally going somewhere, and I guess it was because she didn't want to leave her mama. But good, I'm glad they're going to go, and we'll see what Edward Ferrars has to say with himself if they do finally meet, and Lucy and freaking Eleanor might meet together with Edward. It's so crazy. All right, everybody, ta-ta and happy reading. Don't forget to comment or like or say hello or just tell me what you're reading. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about books, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about everything that we be reading every day. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about books. Who would have thought? All right, ta-ta.